My finger was on the trigger. The man in front of me was about to die. 20 feet of dusty earth separated us, but I could see the hate in his eyes clear as day. His name was Harold Blackwood, and the scar that twisted across his face was almost as ugly as the soul behind it. His hand was inching toward the revolver at his hip, slow and deliberate. "Step back, Blackwood," I said. My voice was low, but it carried in the tense afternoon air. "Step back now, or I swear to God I'll shoot." Behind me I could feel her. Nayeli, silent, watchful, a force of nature packed into a human form. Blackwood spat in the dirt. "She's coming with us, Hayes. This ain't your fight." My finger tightened on the trigger. "She's my wife," I said, the words feeling strange and new and truer than anything I'd ever said. "And this is our home." His laugh was like gravel grinding together. "Your wife? A savage? You're more pathetic than I thought." The mob behind him shifted, a beast with a dozen angry heads. My gaze didn't waver. I held his eyes even as the memories came crashing in. Memories of another time, another life, and all the blood that connected then to now. This standoff didn't start today. It started 6 months earlier, with a promise I made to my dying wife. 6 months earlier, I woke up with a strangled cry. The sheets were soaked with sweat, even though the morning air was cold enough to see my breath. In my dream, I'd seen her again. Sarah. Her face was pale with fever, her blue eyes burning with a light that wasn't long for this world. She was making me promise. It was always the same dream. Always the same promise. "Don't let this turn you bitter, Ben. Find a way to be happy again. Promise me." I sat up, rubbing my calloused hands over my face. The scratch of my beard was a familiar comfort. Outside, the first gray light of dawn was seeping through the cabin windows. Another day. Another battle to find a reason to face it. Scout, my old dog, whined softly from his spot by the cold hearth. His roomy eyes watched me with a patience only a dog can have. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, the wooden floor cold against my bare feet. "I'm all right, boy," I said, my voice rough from disuse. "Just the same old ghosts." His tail thumped weakly against the floorboards. He knew. He'd been with me through it all. 5 years of this crushing solitude. 5 years since Sarah was gone. The routine was a machine I had built to keep myself moving. Dress, eat, work, sleep. The cabin was small, built by my own hands when Sarah and I first staked our claim on this piece of Texas soil. Back then it felt like a palace, full of light and possibility. Now it was just a box to keep the weather out, a place to wait for my own time to run out. I splashed cold water on my face from the basin. The shock was welcome. It drove the last wisps of the dream away. In the small, cracked mirror on the wall, a stranger stared back. I was 40, but I looked 50. Gray streaked my hair. My face was a road map of hard lines, and my eyes had faded to the color of a winter sky. The war had aged me. Sarah's death had finished the job. Scout struggled to his feet, his old joints creaking. He'd been with me through the war, through building this homestead, through Sarah's sickness, and through the long, empty years that followed. Now he was old. Just another countdown I tried not to think about. "Breakfast time, old friend," I said, moving to the small kitchen area. After a simple meal of black coffee and stale cornbread, I stepped out onto the porch. Scout limped faithfully at my heels. The October air was crisp, carrying the promise of winter. My ranch spread out before me. 50 acres of scrubland, a small garden plot Sarah had tended, a corral for my horse and mule, and a few cattle grazing in the distance. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A kingdom of dirt and loneliness. It was just enough work to keep me from thinking too much. The day unfolded like every other. Mending fences, checking the cattle, drawing water from the well. By mid-afternoon, I realized I was running low on a flour and coffee. I'd have to ride into Silver Creek. The thought filled me with a familiar dread. I hated town. Hated the pitying looks from people who remembered me with Sarah. Hated the forced conversations. But a man needs coffee. "Keep an eye on things, Scout," I told the dog, who had taken up his usual post on the porch. "I'll be back before dark." The ride to Silver Creek took an hour. My horse, Samson, knew the way by heart. It let my mind wander, and my mind always wandered to the same dark place, the war. I joined the Union Army at 22, a boy full of fire and ideals. I left Sarah with promises of a quick return. 4 years later, I came home a different man. The wounds you could see were nothing compared to the ones you couldn't. The worst of it wasn't the battles back east. It was what came after. As the war was winding down, my unit was sent west. Indian troubles, they called it. My stomach still clenched when I remembered it. The attack on the Comanche village. It had been a cold, gray dawn, just like this morning. The orders were clear, a show of force, a punishment for raids on settler communities. It wasn't a show of force. It was a massacre. I remembered Blackwood's face, twisted with a savage joy as he cut down fleeing figures. At first, I followed orders, swept up in the chaos. But when I saw the women and children running for their lives, something inside me shattered. I started firing into the empty air, pretending, while the slaughter raged around me. Then I found him, a boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, hiding under a woven basket. Our eyes met, terror in his, shame in mine. I made a split-second decision. I lifted him, ran to the edge of the chaos, and pointed him toward the hills. Before he vanished, I tore a strip from my uniform, scribbled my name on it with a pencil stub, and pressed it into his small hand. A useless gesture of atonement that had haunted me ever since. I never told Sarah about that day. Some sins are too heavy to share. The first buildings of Silver Creek appeared on the horizon, pulling me from my thoughts. The town had grown. A general store, a saloon, a church. I guided Samson toward the hitching post outside the store, my shoulders already tense. As I dismounted, I heard a commotion from the town square. A crowd of men. Their voices were a mix of jeers and ugly laughter. My first instinct was to ignore it, get my supplies and get out. But something in the sound of that laughter, a cruel, eager edge, made me pause. I led Samson toward the edge of the gathering, keeping to the shadows. The men were in a circle around a wagon, and standing on the wagon bed was Harold Blackwood. I froze, my heart hammered against my ribs. I hadn't seen him since the war, had no idea he was in this territory. He looked the same except for the long, pale scar that ran from his temple to the corner of his mouth, a souvenir from some other brutality. I pulled my hat lower, trying to hide my face. He'd never known my name, just another face in the regiment, but I remembered him. Oh, I remembered him. "Gentlemen of Silver Creek," Blackwood's voice boomed across the square. "Today I bring you a rare opportunity." He gestured with a theatrical flourish to a figure standing beside him. It took me a second to realize it was a person, a woman. Her hands were bound. A rough burlap sack covered her head and shoulders. She wore the tattered remains of a deerskin dress, and her bare feet were caked with dust and blood. "A genuine Comanche savage," Blackwood announced, giving the rope around her neck a tug that made her stumble. "Caught her myself, skulking near the old Thompson place, probably looking to steal, or worse." A murmur of fear and excitement went through the crowd. I felt sick. My hand went to the knife at my belt. Despite the sack, despite the ropes, she stood straight. Her chin was lifted. There was a dignity in her stance, a refusal to be broken that hit me like a physical blow. "She's broken in some," Blackwood was saying, his voice oily. "Good for cooking, cleaning, whatever else a man might need from a squaw." He winked. A few men laughed. "What am I bid?" "Let's start at $5. $5 for a lifetime of service." The bidding started, slow, punctuated by crude jokes. I was rooted to the spot, watching in horror. A cold rage was building inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. My eyes were fixed on the woman. Something about her, it was hauntingly familiar. The proud set of her shoulders, the way she held her head. And that's when I saw it. A detail so small, so specific, it made the blood freeze in my veins. The beadwork on the hem of her dress. It was Comanche, yes, but it was the pattern of the tribe from that village, the village I had helped destroy. She could be a survivor. She could be related to the boy I had saved. She was a living ghost from the worst day of my life. The bidding had stalled at $3.50. A weather-beaten rancher near the front called out, "And that's my final offer for a used-up Savage." Blackwood's face darkened. "$3.50 for a healthy young woman? Come now, gentlemen." That's when the words left my mouth, before I even knew I was going to say them. $1. A hush fell over the crowd. Every head turned, trying to find who had spoken. I stepped forward out of the shadows, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. Blackwood squinted, his eyes narrowing. "What was that, friend?" "I said $1, I repeated, my voice stronger now. I met his gaze, praying he wouldn't recognize me. It was an insult, a bid so low it mocked the entire disgusting spectacle. I expected him to explode with rage. Instead, a slow, malicious smile spread across his scarred face. $1, he repeated, his voice thick with contempt. "For this fine specimen. Going once. Going twice." He scanned the crowd. No one else bid. His smile widened. "Sold! To the lonely farmer for $1." The crowd erupted in laughter. I felt their stares like 1,000 tiny needles. "Come get your property, mister," Blackwood sneered. "Hope she's worth every penny." I moved forward. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I felt like I was watching myself from a great distance. This close, I could see the slight tremor in the woman's bound hands, the only sign of her fear. I pulled a worn silver dollar from my pocket and tossed it onto the wagon bed. It landed with a dull clink that sounded impossibly loud. Then, with deliberate slowness, I took out my knife and cut the ropes on her wrists. "Come," I said simply, turning away from Blackwood's mocking eyes. "My horse is this way." To my surprise, she followed without hesitation. A few paces behind me, her bare feet silent on the dusty ground. I could feel the crowd's eyes on our backs, hear their whispers and snickers. I kept my gaze fixed ahead. At the hitching post, I untied Samson and mounted. I hesitated, then reached down, offering her my hand. She stood motionless, her faceless head tilted up at me. Then, with a grace that defied her situation, she placed her small, calloused hand in mine. I pulled her up behind me. "Hold on," I said gruffly. After a moment, I felt her hands rest lightly on my waist. We rode out of Silver Creek in silence, the weight of 100 stairs on our backs. I kept Samson at a steady trot until the town disappeared behind us. Only then did I let my shoulders relax, just a fraction. My mind was racing. What had I done? What madness had possessed me? And what in God's name was I going to do with her now? We reached my ranch as the sun was setting, painting the scrubland in gold and amber. Scout limped out to meet us, barking a greeting that turned into a wary growl when he caught the scent of a stranger. I dismounted, then awkwardly helped the woman down. She stood beside Samson, her head turning slowly, taking in her surroundings despite the sack. "This way," I said, gesturing toward the small storage cabin. "You can stay in there." I led her to the cabin, Scout trailing behind, his hackles raised. Inside it was simple but clean. A narrow cot, a small table, a trunk. I lit the lamp on the table, casting the room in a warm, flickering glow. Then finally I turned to face her. She stood just inside the doorway, still and watchful beneath the sack. I took a deep breath. "I'm going to take that off now," I said, my voice rough. She didn't respond, but she didn't pull away as I stepped closer. My fingers brushed the worn deerskin of her dress as I reached for the bottom edge of the burlap. I hesitated, giving her a chance to resist. She remained perfectly still. Slowly I lifted the sack. The last of the evening light spilled through the open door and fell upon her face, and for the first time in 5 years, Benjamin Hayes forgot how to breathe. She was beautiful, but not in a way I was prepared for. Her face was all proud angles and resilient planes. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, full lips pressed into a firm line. Her skin was the color of rich earth, and her hair was black as a raven's wing, falling in a thick braid over one shoulder. But it wasn't her beauty that struck me dumb. It was the fierce, untamed dignity in her expression. There was no fear in her eyes, only a watchful intelligence and a defiant pride that could have stared down an army. And then I saw it. With a jolt of recognition that nearly drove me to my knees, I saw the small tattoo at the base of her throat, 3 small dots arranged in a triangle. The mark of the chief's family. The mark from the village I had helped destroy. She wasn't just any survivor. She was royalty. The daughter of the chief I had watched die. And she was living in a shed on my property. And she had no idea I was one of the men who had pulled the trigger. We just stared at each other in the gathering dusk. Two souls connected by a thread of history neither of us had chosen. In her eyes, there was no recognition. Only a careful assessment, a measuring of the strange white man who had bought her for $1. "My name is Benjamin Hayes," I said finally, the words feeling hollow and useless. "This is my ranch. You're safe here." Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in the depths of her eyes. Skepticism, maybe, or bitter amusement at the idea of safety offered by a man like me. "I'll bring you some food and water," I stammered, "and blankets. It gets cold." I backed toward the door, suddenly desperate for air, for space to process the magnitude of what I had just discovered. "I'll be back soon." Then I fled into the darkness, Scout at my heels. Back in my own cabin, I leaned against the closed door, my heart racing. Her face was burned into my memory, accusatory, proud. What had I done? Had I rescued her, or just transferred her from one cage to another? Was I any better than Blackwood? Scout whined, sensing my distress. I pushed myself into motion. I gathered a pitcher of water, a plate of cornbread and jerky, and a spare blanket. Steeling myself, I returned to the small cabin. She was exactly where I had left her, standing in the center of the room. She watched me place the items on the table, her expression unreadable. I'll leave you alone now," I said, backing toward the door again. "If you need anything, I'm in the main house." I gestured vaguely, then turned to go. I paused at the threshold. "I don't know your name," I said without looking back. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken history. I didn't expect an answer. I was about to leave when her voice came, low and melodious, despite its coldness. "Nayeli." The sound of her name hung in the air, a tiny bridge across a massive chasm. I nodded once, still not turning, and stepped out into the night, closing the door softly behind me. The days that followed fell into a strange, silent routine. I'd leave food and water on the porch of her cabin in the morning and evening. She would take them inside only after I was gone. I never saw her eat, but the empty plates told me she was surviving. I tried to give her space. I kept my distance while I worked, but I couldn't help but watch her from the corner of my eye. She began to explore her surroundings, moving with a fluid grace that seemed to mock the harsh landscape. On the third day, I left a pair of Sarah's old boots outside her door, along with a simple dress that had been packed away in a trunk. The boots disappeared. The dress remained untouched. She continued to wear her tattered deerskin, though I noticed she had washed it in the stream that ran along the edge of my property. Scout, to my surprise, was the first one to breach the wall of silence between us. On the fourth morning, I looked up from mending a fence and saw him. The old dog was lying in a patch of sun near her cabin. Nellie was sitting on the porch steps, her fingers working with a piece of rawhide. Scout's tail thumped lazily against the dirt as she spoke to him in a low voice, words in a language I didn't understand. The sight hit me with an unexpected pang. It looked so natural. The woman, the dog, the soft morning light. For a moment, it almost felt like the home Sarah and I had dreamed of. The thought brought a wave of guilt so intense it nearly buckled my knees. I turned away, focusing fiercely on my work until the feeling passed. That evening, as I sat on my own porch watching the sunset, a wagon appeared on the horizon. Reverend Thompson from Silver Creek. My heart sank. I wasn't in the mood for company, especially not now. The Reverend was a tall, gaunt man in his 50s with kind eyes. He had lost his own daughter to a Comanche raid years ago, a tragedy that had somehow deepened his faith instead of hardening it. "Benjamin, my friend," he said, his gaze taking in the second cabin with a questioning glance, "I heard you had acquired some company." News traveled fast. "It's not what people are saying," I said defensively. "I couldn't just leave her there." Thompson nodded thoughtfully. "I didn't think it was. That's not your way. But you should know there's talk. Blackwood has been spreading stories, making insinuations." My jaw tightened. "Blackwood can go to hell." Indeed, Thompson agreed mildly. But in the meantime, he's stirring up trouble. People are saying you should turn her over to the authorities. Have her sent to a reservation. And what do you think, Reverend? I asked. He sighed, his gaze drifting to the horizon. I think hatred is a poison. And I think God puts people in our path for a reason, though his reasons aren't always clear at the time. Before I could respond, movement caught my eye. Nellie had emerged from her cabin. She was standing at the edge of the garden watching us. In the fading light, her face was a study in wary suspicion. Thompson followed my gaze. I saw his body tense slightly at the sight of her. Old griefs cast long shadows, but then he visibly gathered himself and raised a hand in greeting. "Good evening, miss," he called, his voice gentle. Nellie didn't respond, but she didn't retreat. She held her ground. "She doesn't speak much English," I said, though I really had no idea. Thompson nodded, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small Bible. "I brought this for you," he said, handing it to me. "Remember, Benjamin, forgiveness is not just something we receive. It's something we must give to others and to ourselves." With that cryptic remark, he left, leaving me to wonder just how much he knew or guessed about my past. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my table, the Bible open before me, its words a blur. My mind was full of Nellie's watchful eyes, Blackwood's scarred face, the Reverend's words. A soft knock at the door startled me. Scout lifted his head, but didn't bark. I opened the door cautiously. It was Nayeli. She stood on my porch wearing Sarah's boots. A strange tightness gripped my chest. In her hand, she held a small bundle of dried herbs. She held the bundle out to me. "What is this?" I asked. She pushed it toward me more insistently, then made a gesture of drinking. "Tea?" I guessed. She nodded once curtly. Then she pointed to Scout, who had limped to the door. The old dog's joints had been bothering him more than usual. "For Scout?" I asked, surprised. "To help with his pain?" Another nod. This time the faintest softening around her eyes. I took the bundle. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. She held my gaze for a moment longer, and I had the uncomfortable feeling she was seeing right through me. Then she turned and walked back to her cabin, disappearing into the darkness. I closed the door, the bundle of herbs clutched in my hand. It was a small thing, this gesture, but it was the first time she had acknowledged me as something other than her captor. It was the first time in 5 long years that someone had reached out to me with an act of kindness. And in the silence of my lonely cabin, it felt like everything. For days we didn't speak a word, just two ghosts orbiting each other, until the night the storm came, and that storm would change everything. A tentative pattern began to emerge between us. Each morning I would leave something on her porch. Food, a brightly colored scarf I'd ridden to town to buy. And each evening I would find something in return. More of her medicinal herbs, a shirt of mine I'd torn on a fence, now neatly mended. We were building a language without words, a fragile bridge across the chasm of our differences. I found myself watching for her as I worked. She knew the land in a way I never could. She would study the plants, her fingers gently touching leaves and stems as if greeting old friends. She could read the clouds, the flight of birds. I was just a trespasser here. She was a part of it. The nights grew colder. One evening as I sat on my porch, I saw her emerge from her cabin. To my surprise, she walked directly toward me, stopping at the foot of the steps. In the golden light of sunset, she looked like a figure from another world. "Nellie," I said, her name feeling strange and wonderful on my tongue. She pointed to the sky, where heavy clouds were gathering on the western horizon. "Storm," she said, her voice low and musical. I nodded. "Looks like it." She shook her head, holding up 2 fingers pressed together. Soon, as if on cue, a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the plains. I rose to my feet. Texas storms could be violent. "I should get the animals into the barn and I said. To my surprise, she nodded and gestured for me to lead the way. Together, we walked to the corral. The air had grown heavy with the metallic scent of rain. As I led Samson toward the barn, Nellie approached Jeremiah, my notoriously stubborn mule. She spoke to him in soft, soothing tones, and to my amazement, the animal followed her into the barn without a fight. "He likes you," I observed. She glanced at me, a flicker of something like amusement in her eyes. Animals know truth, she said, not like men. Before I could ask what she meant, a flash of lightning lit up the barn, followed by a deafening crack of thunder. The storm was on us. Rain began to pound on the roof like 1,000 angry drums. We should wait it out, I said, turning back to her. I broke off, alarmed by her expression. Her face had gone rigid, her eyes fixed on something behind me. I whirled around, expecting to find an intruder, but there was nothing. Another flash of lightning, another boom of thunder that shook the barn's foundations. In that brief, brilliant light, I saw Nayeli flinch. A tremor ran through her body. "Are you afraid of storms?" I asked gently. She didn't answer. Her hands were clenched at her sides, her breathing shallow. I realized it might not be the storm itself. It might be what the storm sounded like. Gunfire. An attack. The day her village was destroyed. Without thinking, I moved closer, my movements slow and non-threatening. "It's all right," I said softly. "We're safe in here." She slowly turned to look at me. In the dim light, she looked younger, more vulnerable than I had ever seen her. "Sit," I said, gesturing to a pile of clean straw. "I'll light the lantern." I busied myself with the task, giving her space. When I turned back, she had settled in the straw, her knees drawn up to her chest. I hung the lantern on a hook and sat down several feet away. For a long while, we sat in silence, the storm raging outside. "When I was a boy," I found myself saying, the words spilling out of a place I had locked away for years. "My mother used to tell me that thunder was just the angels moving furniture in heaven." Nellie looked at me, her expression curious. "She died when I was 10, I continued, not sure why I was telling her this. "Fever took her, same as it took my wife." Nellie's gaze was steady, listening. "I joined the army to get away," I said, the words coming easier now. "To be something different, to make a difference." A bitter laugh escaped me. Some difference I made? I fell silent, suddenly aware of how much I had revealed. After a moment she spoke, her voice soft but clear. "My mother died too, when I was young." The simple statement hung in the air between us, a small but significant bridge. "I'm sorry," I said. She nodded once, then added, "Storm that night too." Understanding dawned on me. "That's why you're afraid of them." She looked away, her profile proud and defiant. "Not afraid," she said firmly. "Remember, the distinction was important to her. She wasn't cowering. She was honoring a memory, a private ritual of grief." "I understand," I said quietly. "I remember too." The silence that followed was different, not tense, but comfortable. As the storm began to fade, I found myself talking again. I told her about my childhood, about meeting Sarah, about our dreams for this ranch. I talked more than I had in years. When I mentioned the war, I found myself skipping over the worst parts. The truth was still too heavy to voice. Instead, I told her about coming home, about building this life with Sarah, about the 5 happy years we had before the fever took her. "She made me promise to be happy again," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "But I didn't know how. Without her, everything seemed pointless." Nellie's expression softened. "Hard promise," she said simply. "Yes," I agreed, grateful for her understanding. "Very hard." The rain had slowed. We had been talking for hours. "We should head back," I said, rising to my feet. Outside, the world was washed clean. The clouds had parted, revealing a spray of stars. We walked side by side toward the cabins. At the spot where we would part ways, we paused. In the lantern light, with water droplets glistening in her hair like tiny diamonds, she looked otherworldly. "Thank you," she said softly, "for story." "You're welcome," I nodded, suddenly awkward again. A small smile curved her lips. There and gone so quickly I almost missed it. Then she turned and walked toward her cabin. I stood watching until her door closed. For the first time in 5 years, I had shared my memories of Sarah. For the first time in 5 years, I had felt something other than guilt and emptiness. It was a small thing, a conversation in a barn during a storm. But as I turned toward my own cabin, I felt as if a door long closed had cracked open just enough to let in a sliver of light. That night, the dream that came to me was not of fever and promises, but of a storm-washed sky. and a woman whose dignity could not be purchased for any price. The next morning, the world was scrubbed clean. I rose early and stepped onto my porch. The sight that greeted me stopped me in my tracks. Nellie was kneeling in Sarah's old garden. The garden had been neglected for years, overrun with prairie grass. But here she was, her hands moving through the soil, pulling weeds, clearing debris with a quiet determination. It felt like both a violation and a blessing. I approached slowly. She looked up, her expression guarded. "You don't have to do that," I said. She sat back on her heels. "Want to," she replied simply. Then after a pause, "Good earth here. Wants to grow." I looked at the plot of land, seeing it through her eyes, not as a painful reminder of loss, but as an opportunity for renewal. "What would you plant?" I asked. "Beans, corn, squash," she said, pointing to different sections. "Three sisters, growing together, help each other." It was the first time she had spoken directly of her people's ways, and I felt a fresh wave of guilt. I wanted to ask her about her life before, but the words stuck in my throat. Every question felt like a step closer to the truth I wasn't ready to confess. "I have seeds in the storage shed," I said instead. "From before. You're welcome to them." She nodded. "Thank you." I turned to go, then hesitated. Would you like some breakfast?" I was about to make some. She looked surprised, then wary. After a moment, she nodded cautiously. "Yes." We walked to my cabin together. Scout greeted us at the door, his tail wagging with extra enthusiasm for Nayeli. Inside, I busied myself with cooking, oddly nervous to have her in my space. The cabin suddenly seemed too small, too personal. Sarah's quilt on the bed, the shelf of books we read together. Nellie's gaze lingered on the small portrait of Sarah on the wall. "Your wife?" she asked. "Yes. Sarah." She studied the image. She had kind eyes. "She did," I agreed, my throat tight. "The kindest." We ate in silence. It was the first meal we'd shared at the same table. "It's good," she said after a while. "It's nice to have company," I replied. Her dark eyes studied me. "You are alone long time." It wasn't a question. 5 years, I nodded. "A hard way to live," she observed. "Yes," I said softly. "It is." When we finished, she surprised me by gathering the plates and taking them to the wash basin. "You cook, I clean," she said, with a look that was almost amused. Fair. I couldn't argue. I just sat and watched her, a strange sense of normalcy settling over the cabin for the first time in years. "Seeds," she prompted when she was done. "Right," I said, rising from the table. "I'll show you." We spent the morning in the garden preparing the soil. As we worked, a rider appeared on the horizon. My hand instinctively went to my belt. Nally tensed beside me. "It's all right," I said, as the figure grew closer. "It's Hiram. He's a friend." Hiram Wilson was an old half-Cherokee man who lived about 10 miles west. He was in his 70s, his face a beautiful mess of lines, his long gray hair in a neat braid. He lived his life between two worlds and carried the wisdom of both. "Benjamin," he called, reining in his horse. His sharp eyes moved from me to Nellie. A look of surprise, then deep curiosity crossed his face. "And who might this be?" he asked, switching smoothly from English to Cherokee. To my astonishment, Nellie responded, in what sounded like the same language, though with a different accent. Hiram's eyebrows shot up and they began a rapid exchange that left me completely lost. After a moment, Hiram turned to me, his expression grave. "She's Comanche. She says you bought her from a man with a scar." I winced. It wasn't like that. He was selling her like an animal. I had to do something. Hiram nodded thoughtfully. "And now, what do you intend to do with her?" "Nothing," I said, uncomfortable. "She's free to go whenever she wants." Hiram translated this. Nellie responded quickly, her eyes never leaving my face. "She says she knows she can leave," Hiram relayed. "Says she stays because she chooses to, for now." The knowledge hit me like a physical blow. She had stayed by choice. All this time. Would you ask her about her people?" I requested, my curiosity finally overcoming my caution. "About how she came to be with Blackwood?" Hiram conveyed the question. Nellie's face darkened. She spoke at length, her voice taking on a harder edge. Hiram listened, his own expression growing grim. She was the daughter of a chief, he translated when she had finished. My blood ran cold. Her village was attacked by soldiers many years ago. Most were killed. She escaped with her younger brother. My heart began to pound so loudly I was sure they could hear it. They lived with another band for a time, Hiram continued, unaware of my inner turmoil. But there was sickness, and her brother disappeared. She has been searching for him ever since. He paused. She was following the man with the scar, Blackwood, because she heard he was part of the attack. She was captured while watching his camp, planning to... He hesitated, glancing at Nellie, who lifted her chin defiantly. Planning to kill him for what he did to her people. The world seemed to tilt. She was hunting Blackwood, the same man I had served with, the same massacre I had been a part of. If she knew, if she ever found out my role in it, would her vengeance extend to me? Hiram stayed for the rest of the afternoon, acting as interpreter. As the sun began to set, he prepared to leave. Be careful, Benjamin, he said quietly so Nellie couldn't hear. There's more to her story than she's telling, and I suspect there's more to yours as well. He rode away, leaving us standing side by side in the fading light. The air between us was charged with new knowledge, new dangers. That night I lay awake staring into the darkness. I thought of Nayeli, sleeping just a stone's throw away, a woman hunting my former comrade, a woman who had lost her family, her people, her brother, to the same violence I was complicit in. The weight of my secret was suffocating, and then a thought, a terrible and hopeful possibility struck me. The boy I had saved, the small, terrified face, the trust in his eyes. Could it have been him? Could it have been Nayeli's brother? The timing fit, the location fit. If it was true, if the one good deed I did on that horrific day was saving the brother she'd been searching for all these years, what then? Would one act of mercy be enough to balance the scales? That night, my dreams were filled with the sound of gunfire, the screams of the dying, and the accusing eyes of a woman who stood watching from the edge of the flames. The weeks that followed brought a subtle shift. Winter arrived with a bitter cold snap. Nellie and I worked alongside each other, reinforcing the cabins, chopping firewood. Her presence became as natural as the air I breathed. She seemed to anticipate what I needed before I did. In the evenings, we would share meals in my cabin. The space between us at the table grew smaller. Her English improved, and she began to tell me stories of her people, tales of trickster coyotes and wise buffalo. I was entranced. In those moments, the weight of my secret would lift, just for a little while, but the guilt always returned. The more I came to know her, the more impossible it seemed to tell her the truth. One cold morning, a sharp pain lanced through my leg, the old war wound. I stumbled, biting back a curse. Nellie was at my side in an instant, her strong hand steadying me. You hurt, she said. It's nothing, old injury. Show, she commanded. Reluctantly, I rolled up my pant leg, revealing the puckered, discolored scar. She knelt, her fingers gently probing the damaged tissue. War? She asked. I nodded. Confederate shell. Wait here, she said. She returned a few minutes later with a pouch of herbs and a jar of water. She mixed a pungent paste and began to spread it over the scar. Her touch was clinical but gentle. Where did you learn this? I asked. Her hands paused. My grandmother, she said softly. She was a medicine woman. A shadow crossed her face. She died in the attack. She stood before the soldiers, told them to stop. Her voice hardened. They shot her first. I felt the familiar clench of guilt in my gut. I had been there. I had seen an old woman step forward. I had watched as Blackwood gave the order to fire. I'm sorry, I said. The words were pathetic, useless. Long ago now, she said, though her eyes told a different story. That evening, a knock at the door. It was Reverend Thompson, snow dusting his coat. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said, noting the two place settings at the table. Not at all, I said. Nayeli wanted to be alone tonight. I knew the morning's memories had been hard on her. I wanted to check on you, Thompson said, his voice grave. There's more talk in town. Blackwood has been stirring up sentiment, telling people you're harboring a dangerous savage, that you've gone native, as he puts it. My hand stilled. You think he might come here? Try to take her? I think it's a possibility you should prepare for, the Reverend said carefully. He paused. There's something else. Blackwood was in the army too. Out west. He's been boasting about a great victory against a Comanche village. His voice was heavy with disgust. The way he tells it, it wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. The air in the cabin grew thick. And you're wondering if I was there, I said flatly. I'm wondering if you know what really happened, he corrected gently. The lie was on my tongue. It would have been so easy, but I couldn't, not to this man. I was there, I admitted, the words like stones in my mouth. It was just as you said, a massacre. Thompson closed his eyes briefly, as if in pain. Did you? I followed orders. At first, I said, the confession burning my throat. But then, I saw him. I couldn't. I shook my head, unable to continue. There was a boy. I managed to get him away. The Reverend was silent for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and laid a hand on my arm. The burden you carry is heavy, Benjamin. But redemption isn't earned by hiding from our sins. It's found in facing them. How do I make amends for something like that? I asked. The question that had haunted me for years, finally spoken aloud. Perhaps by protecting the woman who now lives under your care, he suggested. The words settled into the wounded places in my soul. She is the daughter of the chief, I said quietly. Her grandmother was the first to be killed. Her brother disappeared. Understanding dawned in Thompson's eyes. The boy you saved? I don't know. Maybe. But if she ever finds out I was there, then she will have to decide whether one act of mercy outweighs your initial compliance, and Thompson said. It wasn't the absolution I wanted, but it was the truth. After the Reverend left, I stood at the window, watching the snow fall. My mind was racing. If Blackwood came, when he came, I would be ready. I would not fail Nellie as I had failed her people. That night, I dreamed of the boy I had saved. In the dream, he grew older, his face transforming into a young man's. And when he spoke, it was with Nellie's voice, asking a question I couldn't quite hear, but knew was vital to answer. I woke with the first gray light, the dream clinging to me like a cobweb. The snow continued for 3 days. On the 4th day, the sun emerged, turning the world into a dazzling, blinding white. I was in the barn when I heard Nayeli call my name. An unusual urgency in her voice put me on alert. I hurried outside. She was pointing toward the horizon. A lone rider was approaching. Hiram? I guessed. Nally shook her head. Too young. As the rider drew closer, I saw she was right. He was a young man, slim and straight-backed. He wore a mix of white man's clothing and traditional garb. Do you know him? I asked, noting the tension in Nayeli's posture. She shook her head, her hand moving unconsciously to the small knife at her waist. The rider reined in his horse at a respectful distance. He looked to be in his early 20s. I look for a man called Benjamin Hayes, he called, his English clear but accented. I'm Hayes. My name is Chayton, the young man said. Hiram Wilson sent me. He reached into a pouch and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a note from Hiram, introducing Chayton as his grandnephew. He knows the Comanche tongue, the note read. Trust him. I looked up to find Nayeli and Chayton already conversing in her language. Her earlier tension had eased, though a weariness remained. Hiram says you can translate, I said to Chayton. He nodded. My mother was Kiowa, my father Comanche. I speak both. He gestured toward Nayeli. She tells me you saved her from a bad man. Bought her for $1. There was no judgment in his tone. Yes, I said. I brought her here. She's free to go. Chayton relayed this. Nayeli responded quickly, her gaze fixed on me. She says she knows this, Chayton translated. She says she stays because she chooses to. Because you are an honorable man. Honorable. The word hit me with unexpected force. The gulf between who she thought I was and who I knew myself to be yawned wider than ever. Inside the cabin, with coffee brewing, I watched the easy rapport between them. They spoke rapidly in Comanche, occasionally laughing. I felt a pang of exclusion, followed by shame. How long had it been since she had spoken freely in her own tongue? Hiram says you need help, Chayton said, turning to me. Says a bad man in town makes trouble. I nodded grimly. Blackwood. Chayton's expression darkened as he translated. Nellie's response was quick and fierce. She knows this man, Chayton said, his voice grave. She says he led the attack on her village. Yes, I said. She was tracking him when she was captured. Chayton nodded. She says she still wants justice, but now she wants safety too. For you. He paused, listening as Nellie spoke again, her expression thoughtful. She says there is something you are not telling her. Something about the attack on her village. The world seemed to stop. The air grew thin. I looked at Nayeli, at the directness of her gaze. This was it, the moment I had been dreading. Yes, I said simply, my voice rough. There is. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to meet her eyes. I was there, I said. During the attack on your village, I was a soldier, under Blackwood's command. The words hung in the air, irrevocable. Chayton's eyes widened, but he translated faithfully. Nellie's face went very still. Her expression closed like a door slamming shut. She spoke a single, cold word. Murderer, Chayton translated reluctantly. I didn't flinch. Yes, I said. At first, I followed orders, but then I saw what it was. A slaughter. I stopped. As Chayton relayed this, something flickered in the depths of her eyes. Not forgiveness, but a willingness to listen. There was a boy, I continued, the memory as vivid as yesterday, hiding beneath a basket. I found him, but I took him to the edge of the village and showed him which way to run. Before he left, I gave him a piece of cloth with my name on it. Chayton translated slowly, carefully. Nellie's composure finally cracked. A small gasp escaped her lips. She fired off a rapid series of questions. She asked what the boy looked like, Chayton said. If he had a mark. Here. He touched his right collarbone. The memory surfaced. He was small, dark eyes like yours. And yes, he had a mark. A small scar or birthmark near his collarbone. Nellie stood up so abruptly her chair scraped against the floor. She spoke rapidly, her voice tight with emotion. She says this was her brother, Chayton said, his own voice tinged with awe. Ioti. The mark is how their family knows each other. She has been looking for him since the attack. I rose slowly to my feet, hardly daring to believe it. Her brother. The boy I saved was her brother. Did he survive? I asked urgently. Did he make it to safety? Nellie's voice cracked, a sound of such raw pain it felt like a physical blow. She does not know, Chayton said finally. She has searched for many years, found no trace. No one knows for sure. I sank back into my chair, overwhelmed. The one act of mercy in a day of unforgivable violence. And it had been for her. Nellie spoke again, her voice steadier, her eyes piercing through to my soul. She asks why you did not tell her before, Chayton translated, why you kept this secret. I was afraid, I admitted, the truth both simple and painful, afraid of your hatred, your judgment, afraid of losing. I trailed off, unable to articulate what I had been so terrified of losing. The possibility she represented, the chance for a future beyond the wasteland of my guilt. When Chayton translated this, her expression softened, just slightly. She says she understands fear, Chayton relayed. She says she was afraid too, afraid to trust a white man, afraid to hope her brother was still alive, afraid to feel anything but hate for those who destroyed her people. He paused, listening as she continued. She says she does not know yet if she can forgive you for being part of the attack, but she thanks you for saving Aote, for giving him a chance, and she asks for your help to find him, if he still lives. I looked at her, at the proud tilt of her chin, the vulnerability and strength coexisting in her stance. She was offering neither absolution nor condemnation. She was offering a path forward. I'll help you, I said, my voice rough with emotion. However I can, I promise. Chayton translated. Nellie nodded once. Then without another word she turned and left the cabin. She needs time, Chayton said gently. Big shock. Many feelings. I nodded. The fragile connection we had built had been shattered by my confession. Or had it? Will she leave now? I asked. Chayton considered. I do not think so. She says she chooses to stay. Natalie does not change her mind easily. But trust will take time to rebuild. Trust. Such a small word for such a monumental task. But for the first time in years, I saw a path forward. Twisted and obstacle-strewn, yes, but a path that led somewhere. Whether that somewhere was redemption or judgment remained to be seen. For 2 days, Nayeli kept her distance. She worked, she ate, but she avoided me. The silence was heavier than before, filled with the weight of my confession. The small cabin felt empty again. On the third evening, a knock at the door. It was Nayeli. She stood on the porch, snowflakes catching in her hair. She held a small bundle wrapped in hide. May I come in? She asked, her English careful. I stepped back, my heart pounding. Of course. She entered, bringing the scent of snow and wood smoke with her. I bring this, she said, holding out the bundle. For your leg, pain medicine. Thank you, I said, touched by the gesture. She gestured toward the table. May I sit? We talk. I nodded, hope flickering to life. She sat, her back straight, her hands folded. Chayton helped me find words, she said. English words for difficult things. When you told the truth, I felt many things. Anger, betrayal, confusion. She looked directly at me, her dark eyes unflinching. Part of me wanted to hate you for being a soldier that day. I accepted the words without protest. I deserved them. But, she continued, another part remembered you saved Iote. Remembered you have been kind to me. You respect me. Do not treat me like property. Her hands unfolded, palms up. So I thought. I prayed. I asked the spirits for wisdom. And I decided, hate solves nothing. It only makes more pain. She reached across the table, not quite touching me, but closing the distance. I do not say I forgive, not yet. But I say, I will try to understand. I say we go forward, not back. Together we will find Iote if he lives, and together we will face Blackwood if he comes. I had expected recrimination. I had not dared to hope for this, a willingness to move beyond the past, toward a shared purpose. Together, I echoed finally. The word was a promise and a prayer. She nodded, then glanced at my half-eaten dinner. You do not eat. Food gets cold. The simple domestic observation loosened something in my chest. I wasn't hungry, I said, but I am now. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I bring stew from my cabin. We eat together. I'd like that, I said. As we ate, she began to speak of her brother. Not of his disappearance, but of who he had been. A mischievous child, a swift runner, a dreamer. I listened, building an image of the boy I had saved. If he lives, Nally said, her voice soft with hope. Where do we look? How do we find him? The Reverend mentioned missionaries, I said. Schools where they take Indian children to learn white ways. The cruelty of it was sharp on my tongue. We look there first, she said, her face darkening, but her resolve firm. It's a place to start, I agreed. The shared purpose created a new kind of bond between us. Not erasing the past, but building something alongside it. Later, as she prepared to return to her cabin, she paused at the door. My grandmother said the heart knows a truth when the mouth is still learning the words. She said quietly, my heart knew you were a good man, Benjamin Hayes, even when you had done a bad thing. Before I could respond, she was gone. Her words echoed in my mind. A small flame of hope kindled in the winter of my guilt. The days that followed brought a gradual thaw. Chayton's presence was a catalyst, his translations allowing for deeper exchanges. I learned more about her life, her training in medicine, her love for the plains. In turn, I shared more of my own. We spoke of everything except the attack itself. That day remained a wound too fresh to probe. One evening as snow fell outside, Chayton asked, why does Blackwood hate the Comanche so much? His wife and daughter were killed in a raid, I said. The Reverend told me. It twisted something in him, turned grief into hatred. Chayton translated. Nellie's response was thoughtful. She says she understands losing family, he relayed, but she does not understand choosing hate over healing. She says Blackwood let the darkness eat his heart. Some people find it easier to hate than to heal, I said softly. Nellie's eyes met mine across the table. In that gaze was a recognition, an acknowledgement of the difficult path we were both attempting to walk. The moment was shattered by Scout's sudden bark. Not a greeting, but a sharp, urgent warning. All three of us were instantly on our feet. Scout was at the window, his hackles raised, a low growl in his throat. I grabbed my rifle from its place by the door. "Stay here," I told them, knowing they wouldn't. We stepped onto the porch. The world was crystalline and still under a canopy of stars. Then from the direction of the road came the jingle of harness, the muffled sound of hooves in snow. A wagon emerged from the darkness. As it drew closer, I recognized the figure holding the reins. "It's the Reverend," I said, lowering my rifle in relief. Thompson pulled the wagon to a halt, his face grave in the moonlight. "Benjamin," he called, his breath clouding in the cold air. "I'm afraid I bring troubling news." We brought him inside. "Blackwood is organizing a party," Thompson said without preamble. "He's been drinking, telling wild tales that Nayeli is planning to signal a war party to attack the town." My jaw tightened. "That's absurd." "You and I know that," Thompson agreed. "But fear is a powerful motivator. He's gathered a group of men, 6 or 7 of them, armed and angry." Chayton translated for Nayeli. Her expression darkened. "When will they come?" she asked through him. "How much time do we have?" Thompson looked grim. "It could be tonight. It could be tomorrow. But soon. I'm afraid, very soon." My mind raced. "You should leave," I told Nayeli and Chayton. "Take the horses. Head west to Hiram's place. He'll shelter you." Chayton translated. Nellie's response was immediate and fierce. She stepped forward, her eyes flashing with a warrior's fire. "No," she said in English, the single word backed by iron resolve. She continued in her own language. "She says she will not run," Chayton translated. "She says this is her home now too. She says she will stand with you against Blackwood. She says Blackwood has taken enough from her family, her people, her village. He will not take this place too, this new beginning." I looked at her, at the fierce determination in her stance. How had I ever thought I could send her away? "Together," I said, echoing our earlier promise. "We stand together." She nodded, a small, grim smile on her lips. Thompson looked between us. "You care for each other," he said softly. It wasn't a question. I didn't deny it. "Yes," I said simply. "We do." "Then I'll stand with you too," the Reverend said, his voice firm. "This isn't your fight," I protested. "All fights against hatred are my fight, Benjamin," he replied. "Now let's prepare. We don't have much time." The 4 of us, a guilt-ridden farmer, a Comanche princess, a young warrior, and a man of God, stood in the tiny cabin, ready to face down a storm of hatred. We moved methodically, securing the cabin, checking weapons. Nellie watched me from her place by the fire. There was no fear in her gaze, only a calm resolve. "You should rest," I told her. "I'll take first watch." She shook her head, Chayton translating her refusal. "She says she will not sleep while danger comes." I didn't argue. Instead, Nellie showed me how to set up primitive but effective alarms around the perimeter of the yard. Tripwires, balanced stones, things Blackwood and his men would never anticipate. She worked with a quiet efficiency that spoke of generations of survival. As midnight approached, the cabin settled into a watchful quiet. Nellie came and sat beside me on the bench near the door. "When I was a girl," she said softly, "my grandmother told me a story of 2 wolves. She said inside every person, 2 wolves are always fighting. One is anger, fear, jealousy, hatred. The other is peace, love, hope, kindness." "Which wolf win?" I asked. She said, "The one you feed." The simple wisdom of it resonated deep in my soul. "Your grandmother was a wise woman." "Yes," Nolly agreed. "She saw a man like Blackwood once. She told me, that man has fed the wrong wolf for too long. Now only one wolf lives in him." The observation sent a chill through me. "And me?" I asked quietly. Which wolf do you see in me? She turned, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight. Both still fight, she said simply. But the good wolf, it is growing stronger. I see this. Before I could respond, Scout's sharp bark cut through the night. The warning. All four of us were instantly on our feet. Chayton, from his position at the window, pointed toward the road. There, riders! They are coming! In the ghostly moonlight, I counted 7 mounted figures. It's them, I confirmed grimly. Blackwood and his men. We took our positions. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand but pointed toward the ground. That's far enough, Blackwood, I called as they reached the edge of the yard. State your business and leave my property. Blackwood reined in his horse, his scarred face a mask of hate. You know damn well what my business is, Hayes. That savage woman you're harboring. The only danger here is you, I replied evenly. Reverend Thompson stepped out beside me. What would you call a man who slaughters women and children, Blackwood? Stay out of this, preacher, Blackwood snarled. I cannot stand by while you cloak murder in the language of justice, Thompson replied calmly. Blackwood's men shifted uneasily. One of them spoke up. You said we were just going to take the woman, Blackwood. Bring her to the authorities. Shut up, Blackwood snapped. His hand moved to his gun. Step aside, Hayes. We're taking the woman. She's not going anywhere, I said, raising my rifle slightly. This is her home now, and I am her husband. The declaration, made on impulse, born of a need to protect, hung in the air. Husband? Blackwood's voice dripped with contempt. You married a savage? What I find disgusting, I replied, my voice steady, is a man who would lead an attack on a peaceful village, who would order the killing of women and children. A murmur ran through his men. You weren't there, he spat. You don't know what happened. But I was there, I said quietly, the truth finally spoken aloud for all to hear. I was there, Blackwood. I was one of your soldiers. I saw what you did. The silence that followed was absolute. Blackwood's face went pale. He's lying, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? I took a step forward. Shall I describe it? The village at dawn? The old woman who stepped forward asking for peace? And how you shot her first? Just then, the cabin door opened. Nayeli stepped onto the porch, her posture regal. She regarded Blackwood with a calm dignity that made his hatred seem pathetic. I remember you, she said, her English clear and deliberate. Man with the scar, man who killed my grandmother. Her words, spoken with the weight of absolute certainty, sealed it. One by one, Blackwood's men began to turn their horses, unwilling to be a part of this. Cowards, Blackwood spat. Soon only 3 remained. Blackwood and 2 others with the hard eyes of killers. It doesn't matter, he snarled. We don't need them. The words had barely left his lips when a shot rang out from the side of the cabin. One of his men cried out, clutching a bloody arm. Chayton stood by the corner of the cabin, his rifle raised. Next shot is not in the arm, he called. Leave, now. The wounded man wheeled his horse and galloped away. Now it was just Blackwood and one other. Jenkins! Blackwood roared. Kill Hayes! I'll deal with the woman. Jenkins hesitated. I don't like these numbers, Blackwood. There won't be a next time, Blackwood snarled. In one fluid motion, he drew his gun and fired. Not at me, at Jenkins. The man toppled from his saddle, dead before he hit the snow. Now it's just us, Blackwood said, turning his gun on me. The way it should be. My rifle was already aimed at his chest. Drop it, Blackwood. It's over. But a strange, distant look was in his eyes. It's never over, he said softly. Not until all of them are gone. With shocking speed, he swung his gun toward Nayeli. I saw the movement. I fired. The rifle's report was deafening. Blackwood jerked, but he stayed in the saddle, his gun still aimed at Nayeli. A terrible smile spread across his face as his finger tightened on the trigger. Then a blur of gray fur. Scout! My old arthritic dog launched himself from the porch with the speed of a puppy. He hit Blackwood just as the gun fired, sending the bullet wide. Man and dog crashed to the snow in a tangle of fury. Blackwood cursed, struggling. Scout's jaws closed on his wrist. I was already moving, leaping from the porch. Blackwood's free hand went for a knife at his belt. I reached them just as the blade came free. Without hesitation, I brought the butt of my rifle down hard on his arm. A sharp crack echoed in the night. The knife fell. Enough! I panted, leveling the rifle at his head. It's over. No, a quiet voice said behind me. You will stop now. Nellie stepped forward, her knife held loosely in her hand. She looked down at Blackwood, not with hatred, but with a profound pity. I dreamed for many years of killing you, she said. For my people, for my grandmother, for all you took from me. She knelt beside him, raising the knife. My heart stopped. But instead of striking, she cut a strip from her dress and began to bind his wounded wrist, stemming the flow of blood. Her touch was clinical, the touch of a healer. Blackwood stared at her, his hatred momentarily replaced by utter confusion. What are you doing? He demanded. Saving your life, Nellie replied simply. Not for you, for me, for my spirit. It was the ultimate rejection of the cycle of violence, the most powerful victory I had ever witnessed. But as I turned, I heard Chayton's urgent voice. Benjamin, the dog is hurt. Bad. I was at Scout's side in an instant. My heart constricted. A deep knife wound in his side. Blood stained the snow. Scout, I whispered, cradling his old head. Hold on, boy. Nellie finished with Blackwood and moved swiftly to us. Bring him inside, she instructed. Quick, by the fire. I gathered him in my arms. His breathing was shallow, his once bright eyes dimming. Nellie knelt beside him, working quickly with her herbs, murmuring words in her own language. Will he? I couldn't finish the question. Her eyes met mine, soft with compassion. The wound is deep. His spirit is strong, very brave, very loyal. I stroked his graying muzzle, a lifetime of memories flooding through me. He's been with me through everything, I said, my voice breaking. I don't know how to say goodbye. Nellie's hand covered mine, warm and strong. Then do not say goodbye, she said gently. Say thank you. Say, I will see you again. I bent close to his ear. Thank you, old friend, I whispered, for everything. I'll see you again. His tail thumped once against the blanket. His eyes held mine for a long moment, filled with a love that transcended words. Then with a soft sigh, he closed them for the last time. I remained motionless, grief washing over me in waves. Nellie sat beside me in silence, then began to sing softly, a Comanche song of mourning and celebration, its melody ancient and haunting. The immediate danger had passed, but its aftermath, the grief, the decisions, the uncertain future, remained. The pale winter sun was just clearing the horizon when Reverend Thompson entered. I'm sorry about Scout, he said gently. He was a hero. I nodded, unable to speak. He died protecting his family, Nellie said, her English clear. It is the greatest honor for a warrior. The words brought a strange comfort. As Nellie prepared a simple meal, a knock at the door brought us all to alertness. It is me, Chayton called, with a visitor. I opened the door to find Chayton with Hiram Wilson. Heard there might be trouble, Hiram said without preamble. Came as quick as I could. His gaze fell on Scouts still formed by the fire. Ah, the old one has crossed over. Protecting us from Blackwood, I confirmed. Hiram nodded solemnly. A good death. Honorable. He then turned to Nellie, and they spoke rapidly in her language. When she finished, he turned back to me, a hint of amusement in his expression. She says you declared her your wife. Is that true? I felt my face flush. It seemed the best way to protect her. Hiram waved the question away. Never mind. I bring news that might interest you both. He paused, his sharp eyes meeting Nayeli's. On my way here, I stopped at a mission school near Fort Richardson. I was looking for information about Comanche children taken after raids. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. I showed them a description of a boy with a mark on his collarbone, Hiram said simply. They know him. Nellie made a small sound, a gasp mixed with a sob. A boy was brought in about 8 years ago, Hiram continued, found wandering alone. He had a piece of cloth with a name on it, a white man's name, Benjamin Hayes. My name, the scrap of uniform. It had survived. Hiram nodded. It is the same boy. They call him Joseph now, but he has not forgotten his true name, Aote. He has not forgotten his people. Nally's face transformed with a joy so pure it was almost painful to witness. He is alive? She asked through Chaitin. He is well? Yes, Hiram said, a gentle smile on his face. He is alive. Grown now, almost a man. Strong, smart. They have not broken his spirit, though they have tried. He was planning to run away, to find his sister. Hiram's smile widened. I told him perhaps he does not need to run. Perhaps his sister has found him instead. Nally turned to me, her eyes bright with tears and hope. We go together, she said in English. You helped me find Aote. I helped you bring Blackwood to justice. Then, we decide what comes next. What comes next? It was both a question and a promise, an acknowledgement of an uncertain future, and a commitment to face it together. Together, I agreed. The word felt right. Solid. True. 3 weeks later, I stood on the porch of my cabin watching the sunset. Beside me, Nayeli leaned against the railing, her face peaceful. From inside, I could hear the sound of laughter. Aote, her brother, was home. The reunion at the mission had been emotional. The boy I had saved was now a lanky youth of 15, with Nayeli's same proud bearing. He had produced the faded scrap of uniform from a pouch around his neck. You came back for me, he'd said, just like you promised. Blackwood was in a federal jail, awaiting trial for a list of crimes that grew longer each day as other soldiers, burdened by their own guilt, came forward to testify. Justice was a slow, grinding wheel, but it was turning. What are you thinking? Nally asked, breaking the comfortable silence. I turned to her. This woman who had entered my life as a transaction and had become its center, its purpose, its future. I was thinking about beginnings, I said, about how sometimes they come disguised as endings. She nodded. Like winter. It looks like death, but under the snow the seeds wait. Life sleeps, dreaming of spring. I thought my life was over after Sarah died, I admitted. I was just waiting. And then you came. Her hand moved to cover mine on the railing. You saved me. I saved you. Equal. Equal? Yes. That was what we had become. She turned to face me, her dark eyes serious. Benjamin, when you told Blackwood I was your wife, was it only to protect me? The directness of the question was pure Nally. At first, yes, I admitted. It was the strongest protection I could offer. But now, I search for the words. Now I find myself wishing it were true, not for protection, but because I care for you, Nellie, more than I thought I could ever care for anyone again. She considered this. In my people's way, she said finally, marriage is not paper. It is a promise to walk together, to face life together. And in your people's way, I asked carefully, would someone like me, a white man, with our history, would I be acceptable? Her smile was slow and thoughtful. You are already learning our ways, honoring my family. Her hand tightened on mine. Hope bloomed in my chest. Is that a yes? It is not a yes yet, she corrected, though her eyes were warm. It is the beginning of a conversation. A long conversation, maybe. Her smile widened. But I think it is a good beginning. A very good beginning. More than I had ever dared to hope for. A chance to start again. That conversation is one we're still having. Every day is a new beginning. A new chance to feed the right wolf. Grief and hope, sorrow and love, all woven together to make something stronger than any of them could be alone. We built a new family from the ruins of the past, proving that even in the deepest winter, there is always the promise of spring. If you believe in second chances and the courage it takes to seize them, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories just like this one.